Alarm is growing in Russia's Z community over Russian dictator Vladimir Putin's reluctance to end the war against Ukraine, which has dragged on too long and is no longer victorious. Propagandist Alexander Khramov has spoken of the high likelihood that Moscow will lose everything as a result of this conflict, including the Crimea and the Donbas it captured. The propagandist drew a historical parallel with the Livonian War of the 16th century, recalling the consequences of that long and costly battle for Russia. Everything our country fought for 20 years had to be given up. The protracted Livonian War brought Russia only economic problems and ruin, which ended with the time of troubles. Khramov wrote, according to the blogger, the protracted war not only exhausted resources, but also led to the unification of Moscow's enemies. He recalled that it was precisely because of Ivan the Terrible's aggression that Lithuania formed an alliance with Poland, forming the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, one of Russia's main adversaries for the next 2 centuries. Khramov emphasized that Russian propagandists who compare the current SVO to the Northern War are doing so in vain. For some reason, no one mentions the Livonian War in this context. But it teaches us a completely different lesson, that years of resource-intensive clashes with the enemy can end with 0, or more accurately, negative results, wrote the alarmed propagandist. He didn't rule out the possibility that as a result of this war, Russia would lose all its conquests, including Crimea and the eastern territories. He recalled that Moscow had already lost Kherson in the fighting. The Z blogger didn't rule out the possibility that in the event of a crisis, Russia's so-called new territories would exist only on paper, with their administrations evacuated to Belgorod or Rostov-on-Don. It's time to take stock before it's too late, so that we don't end up like the Livonian War, Khramov concluded. Increasingly, it's Z bloggers and pro-Kremlin commentators who are saying that prolonging the war threatens Russia with internal collapse. Their words betray growing desperation, even among those who recently insisted that everything is going according to plan. The propagandists are trying to reach Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, who has clearly completely lost touch with reality. Media also wrote that even Z economists were howling. Russia faces hard times in 2026. The Center for Macroeconomic Analysis and Short-Term Forecasting, which is close to the Putin regime, has concluded that the Russian economy will almost certainly face a recession in 2026. This statement from Z economists confirms that the Russian economy is indeed in dire straits. The consolidated leading indicator for the emergence of a recession in the Russian economy has exceeded its critical threshold. The system has signaled a high probability of a decline in the physical volume of GDP in 2026, the pro-Kremlin analysts stated in a report. The Center for Macroeconomic Analysis and Short-Term Forecasting, CMASF, cites rising interest rates as the main reason for the worsening forecasts. Until the end of 2025, GDP growth will be supported by buoyant domestic demand, driven by expectations of a VAT increase. However, starting in 2026, this factor will disappear, and demand will likely adjust downwards. Experts warn that the decline in GDP increases the risk of a systemic banking crisis, and Russia is already very close to one, according to the report.
Hundreds of residents of western Alaska coastal villages ravaged by storms arrived in Anchorage on Thursday in one of the most significant airlifts in Alaska history. According to Associated Press, the residents were being housed at a Red Cross evacuation shelter at the Alaska Airlines Sports Center at the University of Alaska Anchorage campus. The storm brought record-high water to 2 low-lying Alaska Native communities and washed away homes, some with people inside. At least 1 person was killed and 2 are missing. Makeshift shelters were quickly established and swelled to hold about 1,500 people, an extraordinary number in a sparsely populated region where communities are reachable only by air or water this time of year. The communities of Kipnuk and Kwigilingok near the Bering Sea saw water levels more than 6 feet above the highest normal tide line. Some 121 homes were destroyed in Kipnuk, a village of about 700 people. Julia Stone, a village police officer in Kipnuk, was working and at the school as the wind suddenly picked up. People started showing up at the building, and her on-call police cell phone began ringing with calls from people in need, some whose houses were floating. They were drifting away, she said. Stone said she tried to reach search and rescue teams and others to determine if there were available boats to help, but described the situation as chaos. Members of her own family, including her son, Alexei, were at home when their house also started drifting. Alexei Stone estimates it moved a few feet. Alexei Stone likened the moving house to a big earthquake, especially with water. They were worried a glass window would break, and breathed a sigh of relief when a floating shed turned away from the house. Alaska natives living a subsistence lifestyle spend the summer hunting and fishing to stock up for the coming winter. Alexei Stone said they lost all their food. They lost 3 freezers full of food, including fish, moose and goose, he said.
I started getting calls that one of the houses, they need help. Their houses were floating and they were drifting away. But that was a chaos. I couldn't do nothing about it. It was hard. Everybody, it was just nightmare. It's a nightmare what we went through. But I thank God we are together.
It was like a big earthquake, especially with water. We were scared that the glass window was gonna break because the water was hitting the window really pretty hard. So we had 2 freezers full, actually 3 freezers full of fish, bird, moose, and other like goose. Like that's all we eat. Dry fish and halibut, all that's gone, all thawed out, and that's a lot of food that we lost. In our village, we say that we're native strong. We have native pride, and nothing can break us down. But this is the hardest that we went through. But everybody's sticking together. The village of Kipnuk is sticking together. Everybody's talking to each other, making sure everybody's okay, hugging them and making sure that they have everything they need. So everybody's taking care of everybody in there. So we're all thankful that we're all alive.